All right, welcome everybody to this early morning session where we're going to be presenting the future climate leaders in a Dragon Den style presentation. So thank you so much for joining us here in person, and thank you for the crowd online as well. I want to present a couple of the leaders that we are accelerating in our program, give them an opportunity to present themselves and their climate solution, as well as give you a bit of an introduction around the ICFA and what we're actually doing. So, my name is Stefan Peters. I'm the Managing Director of the International Climate Finance Accelerator. We are based in Luxembourg, and let me give you a bit of more background. So, we're an initiative, we're an independent non-profit, an initiative that is a public-private partnership where the Luxembourg government, together with private parties that are active in the financial services industry in Luxembourg, banded together to actually accelerate this and actually contribute individually into this entire program. So we also enjoy the support of the European Investment Bank as well as Speurcase, which is the national savings banks of Luxembourg. So this all started back in 2017 when we were talking about how does Luxembourg actually contribute to the finance commitments that they have. Part of that, the International Climate Finance Accelerator, was part of the innovation side where we're responding to a market need. There's a lot of fund managers, early stage, first, second time fund managers who are looking to set up but are struggling with the administrative, financial and operational barriers that come if you want to actually launch and set up an entire fund. So our mission is essentially, we want to create these leaders, we want to build them up and we want to accelerate them. So our objectives are to actually have more fund management teams, but also have more vehicles and actually create a pathway for capital to start flowing from the top level pledges that we see here at COP to actually on the ground investments into company and projects that actually make the shift in climate action happen. So our target group are first, second time fund managers who are looking for highly innovative climate solutions. It still needs to be a tested and very well-developed strategy that they're looking for. We don't just incubate, we really do an acceleration. So we put them through their paces in a selection program that really kind of puts them a little bit more, pushes the boundary and actually gets them ready to also accept institutional capital. We have no requirement that they set up in Luxembourg. We basically say, you know, here's the knowledge of our financial center. We are very well known as one of the biggest fund centers in the world. Leverage that knowledge, leverage that infrastructure, and build your fund wherever you need to build it and deploy into climate action. So you might wonder, how do we actually do this? Well, we have 5 pillars of support, how we help them. 2 of them are financial support and 3 are more on the non-financial side. So we help them first finance the support services they need, for instance, legal structuring, tax policy, and the like. But we also open up a working capital facility for them to finance other activities they do, like going to conferences, doing a lot of fundraising, maybe even building their first team to actually put them together. On the non-financial side, we field a variety of training sessions that go in depth, which are given by our experts, the Big Four, the big law firms, fund administrators in Luxembourg, to go in depth into these topics that all the fund managers need to understand when they actually have a conversation with potential LPs. We match them up with a coach so that they can have their first advisory board member in a sense, to stress test why they're doing what they're doing, maybe hone their proposition a little bit ahead of time when they actually are when they're looking to actually get into the meeting rooms with the variety of players that they target. And last, we allow them to kind of set up shop in Luxembourg, meeting rooms. We facilitate any meetings they have there as well as a landing spot within Greater Europe so that they can kind of easily pass through. So the key benefits of actually running through our program, I think first and foremost is the credibility that it builds. Like I said, we put them through a quite rigorous selection process. It takes 6 months. There's a variety of experts involved who give them the feedback, but also all the training to help them kind of hone their strategies. We give them visibility through a variety of events and conferences that we kind of field and get people together with. And we build a community around them as well. there's nothing like fund managers sharing not only best practices, but also their failures. What are the learnings they had while they were going through that journey of setting up a fund, and sharing that not just in their own cohorts, but with the greater community that we have with the fund managers. And finally, we field regular calls with them as well. We try to help them make warm connections, think through how are they going, what is their next step, and actually help them open doors as such. So we've been in operation since 2018. We've now had 6 cohorts since this year, a total of 28 fund managers that we've provided support to and helped to launch. That's come to a very good year this year, where we had a couple of first closes and second closes announced by our fund managers. So in total, they've managed to get commitments of up to 300 million and have started to deploy this capital into the projects that they're trying to invest into. We still have a long way to go. All our fund managers together are aiming to raise 2.4 billion, which is a great target, and that proves the power of a program like this as well. We're very catalytic, not just in the capital that flows, but we're also looking to actually mitigate greenhouse gases. So we keep track as well what gets deployed and which investment strategy they're looking for, and seeing how they actually mitigate the greenhouse gases. So ultimately, the 2.4 billion should translate not just in mitigation goal of 1.1 billion tons of greenhouse gases mitigated, but also a lot of our investment managers go into climate adaptation, so they're looking to deploy capital into helping the world get ready for the climate change that is inevitably coming. Wanted to just round it up. Obviously, we're presenting today the 2022 cohort, which we selected earlier this year, but we've already started the selection process for next year. We've opened up a call for the expression of interest, so any fund managers who might be in the room or looking online, reach out to us, come join, look at our website to see a little bit more around what we're doing and how we can actually work together for this program. So now we come to the main event. We'll be doing a Dragon's Den style presentation. So we have a couple of fund managers here. We'll give them an opportunity to take the stage and explain what they're doing and what their climate solution is, and then we'll put them through their paces with our dragons. So let me start with our friendly dragons first. We have Nancy Seitsch, who's not yet here but was going to come, but let me give a quick introduction to her as well. So Nancy is the Managerial Advisor in Climate and Environment at the European Investment Bank. She began her career as a civil engineer involved in designing infrastructure that would later need to be adapted to climate change. She joined the EIB over 20 years ago and has been looking to appraise infrastructure projects for the bank and their financing. She became a founding member of the bank's environmental assessment group, and nowadays she plays a key role and works on kind of developing a more strategic approach with the EIB. Our next dragon is Joram, who's here. Joram, could you join us on stage? So Joram Schaven is the Director of Impact and ESG Department at FMO, the Dutch Development Bank. Prior to his current role, he held various positions at FMO, Institute Director of the Strategic and Corporate Affairs Department, Manager of the Credit Department, Chairman of the Investment Committee, and Manager of the Financial Institutions Africa Department. Before joining FMO, Joram was head of a retail team at Clear Capital, an equity research and advisory firm based in London, and he also worked as an economist at the European Central Bank and held various positions at the Dutch Central Bank. Last but not least, Maria Teresa Zapia, who's joining us online. She leads the blended finance and impact management team at Blue Orchard, as well as the sustainability and impact team at Schroders Capital, the private asset business of Schroders created in 2021. Maria Teresa has over 25 years of experience in emerging and frontier markets, has authored and co-authored a number of publications, and is a guest speaker at several universities. Prior to Blue Orchard, Maria Teresa covered several positions at the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, the Asian Development Bank, and the Overseas Development Institute. Thank you guys for joining. And now let's move straight on to our first presentations. So one of our first cohorts is Energy Peace Partners, who will share pre-recording because they are based in San Francisco and were not able to join us online in a live streaming event. We'll hear from Sherwin Das, who's the co-founder of Energy Peace Partners, an organization dedicated to the idea that renewable energy, as the world's principal climate solution, can serve as a building block for peace in fragile, conflict-affected countries, which are among the least electrified in the world. Prior to this, Sherwin spent more than a decade with the United Nations, working to facilitate peace processes and prevent conflict in sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Balkans. If we could run the video, please.
Good morning. My name is Sherwin Das, and I am the Managing Director of Energy Peace Partners, and I'm pleased to speak to you today about the solution that we have developed. Thanks to the ICFA for the honor of selecting us to be part of their 2022 cohort, and for the invitation to be part of this COP27 event. A brief word about Energy Peace Partners to start. At EPP, our mission is to leverage climate and finance solutions to promote peace in fragile regions. We bring together a multidisciplinary team of experts in peace building, renewable energy finance and development, and climate security. We are the creator and global issuer of Peace Renewable Energy Credits, which I will tell you more about shortly. We're working closely with Camco Clean Energy, a climate and impact fund manager with experience leading the clean energy transition in emerging markets. The challenge, as we see it, is that the least electrified countries are also most vulnerable to conflict and climate impacts. However, these countries, which are the least responsible for the climate crisis, are not meaningfully benefiting from climate finance flows. So even though the world's principal climate solution is renewable energy, we are seeing that a small fraction of the more than $300 billion a year is actually flowing to fragile states, given their unique risks and challenges. The majority of these fragile countries are in sub-Saharan Africa, where only 46% of the population has access to reliable electricity. So we developed a new financing instrument called the Peace Renewable Energy Credit. PRECs are high-quality energy attribute certificates reflecting the environmental and social benefits of renewable energy from qualifying projects. PREC sales allow project developers to monetize renewable energy generated in fragile states, while PREC purchases help multinational companies meet their environmental and social goals. Since 2020, PREC transactions involving leading companies like Microsoft, Block, and Google have unlocked funding for transformative renewable energy projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. Projects like community streetlights, hospital solar electrification, and, in the last example on your screen, future PREC revenue was brought forward to provide the project developer with upfront financing. Our PREC aggregation solution scales this model up across a portfolio of projects and countries. Access to finance is increased by monetizing and paying project developers upfront for future PRECs. This de-risks the project and boosts project economics. The PRECs will then be aggregated and resold in voluntary markets, building on growing PREC demand and offering corporate buyers a way to support impactful climate-smart projects in underserved communities. Our solution prioritizes fragile economies in sub-Saharan Africa, starting in countries where we have growing pipeline, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan, as well as Chad, Somalia, and Uganda. It will support $90 million in new electrification and energy transition projects in fragile states, extending energy access to 325,000 households, creating 10,000 jobs, avoiding 650,000 tons of carbon emissions, and supporting UN Sustainable Development Goals 7, 13, and 16. Join us as we extend the renewable energy revolution to some of Africa's hardest to reach communities. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, I'd like to ask our friendly dragons to maybe share some reflections on the Energy Peace Partners climate solution. Joran, you want to go first? Yep.
Thank you, Stefan. I think it's working now. Yeah, so as Director of Impact and ESG, I can only be very excited about the impact proposition of this fund manager, and I think we're in great need of project development in fragile countries like DRC, Somalia, South Sudan, etc. And I think we're all very eager as development banks, certainly, to find viable projects in these areas. And we're finding indeed that there is a real shortage in solutions that target project developers effectively and through that route generate additional projects. I think the idea of the peace credits, if you will, is also very interesting, and I think it's important to market test that and see indeed if there's sufficient demand in the market for these credits, which I think will be an absolutely crucial element to the value proposition of this fund. So I guess that's where I would have a question to the fund manager, to what extent that has been market tested and whether the offtake of these credits is solid. But I'd say from an impact perspective, it's certainly a very interesting proposition, which I'd love to explore further.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Maria Teresa also for some reflections.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, and sorry not to be there. I actually flew back from COP yesterday night. And so a few thoughts. I find very interesting, of course, the fact that we have an opportunity to target SDG 16. As many of you know, I think as asset managers, we have really not done a good job in targeting this SDG. So certainly I think the value proposition here is the fact that we are targeting an SDG that is unfortunately very often forgotten or very, very difficult to tackle. This means that I think the challenge is really the country risk of the markets that we are, targeting. If I think about, for example, the Blue Orchard portfolio in Africa, really many of these countries we have never done business with, and partly is exactly because of a challenging rule of law, a weak corporate governance, and a high country risk. So the question on my side would be, I guess, how could we make sure that any country risk considerations that could effectively, if you want, impact the implementation of this fantastic renewable energy project, how have these been really taken into consideration by the investment team?
Thank you, Maria Teresa. Nancy.
Does this work? Yes. So first of all, apologies for not having heard the first part of the presentation. I'm not normally in a wheelchair, but it's giving me a very interesting experience of what it's like for people who spend their lives in wheelchairs and with disabilities. So I think I could say that so far at the COP here, it's pretty good, but every now and then there's a glitch in the system, and so I apologize for being late. I would have liked to have heard the whole presentation, but I have a couple of questions. I mean, one, obviously, the risk that's just been mentioned, not just the financial risk, but rather the more structural risk of ensuring that you actually get the benefits that you hope. And in order to make sure that that happens, having in place in the management system is something that anticipates, if you like, some of those risks and tries to put in place governance and monitoring and so on to detect any problems and kind of step in before they sort of become more serious. And my second question is, I didn't hear anything about gender, but we do know that especially in some of these great opportunities in low carbon technologies like renewable energy, there's huge benefits in proactively involving women entrepreneurs and women in the community. And so that would be one of my questions, would be, you know, how is the gender aspect handled in the environmental and social management system of the fund? But yes, I agree with Joran, sounds absolutely full of impact, addressing exactly one of the biggest problems discussed here, which is, you know, how to really proactively support the poorest countries, in particular to leapfrog fossil fuel technologies and to be able to have access to energy that is in fact low carbon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those reflections. I'm sure that Sherwin and his team will take them into account to hone their proposition. Next, I'd like to give the word to Nick Nidiritu from Olduvai Capital. Olduvai Capital is an investment boutique aiming to shape a more prosperous, inclusive, and carbon-neutral future. Before co-founding Olduvai Capital, Nick was a portfolio manager at Allan Gray based in South Africa. Over a decade there, Nick helped build the firm's Pan-Africa fund range and co-managed over $1 billion across debt equity strategies in Africa and global frontier markets. He has prior experience in investment banking at Citi in Johannesburg and London, working on M&A advisory and capital raising mandates. So Nick, you're online?
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan. Really appreciate that. So I'm Nick Nidiritu, as Stefan mentioned, based here in Cape Town, South Africa. Our climate action strategy is seeking to address the challenge that we see of scaling financing for distributed renewable solutions across Africa. See, today, there is no shortage of capital for large-scale projects. We're getting funded, whether it's from the DFIs or the banks or other commercial capital providers. The gap that we see in the market is really sort of in the small, mid-market sized, non-utility scale project developers. And what are the attributes of those kind of developers that we're targeting? Number one, they have a track record of established track record of execution on completed projects. Oftentimes, we have worked as subcontractor to the larger utility scale side developers. Secondly, they have an actionable pipeline of projects, right? And they have deep local relationships in their markets. But finally, the challenge for them and an opportunity for us is that they require capital. A, for project completion when they win their bids, and secondly, to help them grow to meet the growing demand that we're seeing in the market. But the challenges that these developers are facing are a couple of primarily related to financing. Number one, these projects tend to be smaller scale to attract the size and attention of sort of the larger capital providers. Secondly, these are SME enterprises that often don't have a strong balance sheet. And finally, what we often find with these developers is the banks will often require them to have collateral. So what is our solution and what is it that we're looking to add? So we're providing a platform that's aggregating funding that will go to the smaller to mid-sized project developers. What's the value add for the developers? Well, we're pre-qualifying the developers who have an established track record and looking to offer them a working capital facility that's a 3 to 5 year loan. Typical ticket sizes will be anywhere from $5 to $15 million, right? It provides them with certainty of funding to for project completion, and it also allows them to grow their team. What's the value add that we see for the capital providers? Number one, our platform is looking at a tiered capital structure that's allowing us to raise notes, right? That we then issuing to larger pension funds and institutional investors, and an equity/merge tier that we're looking to attract capital from catalytic capital investors. The notes aggregating capital that we can then issue to larger institutional investors is offering them a larger ticket price in an area that they want to play in. We've secured a commitment from a large global insurer and are now looking for partners to join us in sort of providing us with the equity/mezz tier. Who are we and who is all of our capital? Well, we're well positioned as an ideal partner for institutional investors that's looking for attractive returns and sustainable impact. Our team is an Africa-based team based here in South Africa, and with a team also in Nairobi. It has an average of 18 years of experience. We've deployed over $1.5 billion in capital of institutional capital across these markets. We've teamed up with experienced industry leaders who are helping us help mobilize the private capital that we need from institutional capital providers. And then finally, we're really looking at risk, returns, and impact. We're very grateful for the ICFA for selecting us as one of their high-impact, innovative managers in this year's cohort, and we're hoping to partner with other like-minded partners in helping scale climate finance for distributed renewable solutions in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. So, over to our dragons. Nancy, would you like to start?
Yes. So again, this is, I think, a win-win in terms of impact. So you're working in a country and countries with huge potential for rolling out many more volumes of renewable energy. And obviously, bringing the small and medium-sized companies into that is absolutely vital. So I think that's. I think the original idea is absolutely fantastic. I think the idea of aggregating it seems, obviously a good way to go. I have one question. In terms of, you're based in South Africa. South Africa has quite a sophisticated banking system. They have some very big, international banks that are based there. So I would be just asking them, what are there any issues with accessing the finance for your fund from South Africa, and is there some blockage that perhaps is causing a problem? Because I actually think it seems to me such a solid idea. That's really my question that popped into my mind. Why would South African banks not be sort of lining up to support this, and South African investors? But otherwise, I would have my usual questions, I suppose, around strong environmental and social management systems, gender and biodiversity and so on, which is really important to bring in, and I think there can be a real added value. Because these kind of things are quite often harder for smaller companies to mainstream, and yet if you aggregate the support to them, you can actually deliver an even better impact than just the pure greenhouse gas impact. So those would be my two questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Nancy. On the first point around sort of the interest that we've seen from, say, South African capital providers, be they banks or other institutional investors, yes, we do believe there's strong interest and there's growing interest. Obviously, their interest has started off sort of still at the larger scale projects. So those are getting funded. What we're seeing is challenges around how to get the aggregation right to fund the smaller developers. The other thing for us, and that's where we're looking Pan-African, is we have a Pan-African outlook. So our current pipeline of developers we're working with, 75% of their projects are ex-South Africa. So there's only a very small portion that's South Africa based. So we're really looking at a solution that can help us scale capital across the continent, and looking to potential South African capital providers as just one sleeve of that. You're absolutely right on your second point in terms of the broader impact that we believe that we can have, especially with some of these SME type developments. And that's something that's quite critical in terms of what we're looking at, and as we view as our value add in this impact ecosystem. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nick. Also, Maria Teresa, if you have some reflections for Nick, we'd welcome them.
Yes, absolutely. So, for me, the one aspect that seems key, it's really defining the size of these projects. We're talking about the missing middle. that the missing middle to me may mean something very different in, and also thinking about the country context, the missing middle is very different even across, African countries. So really my first question would be, can we put some numbers on what could be some of these financing needs, just to really figure out if this is really uncapped by local financial institution, if this really requires, a platform like this. And also assuming that the numbers are significant, then the question would be, why not really more of a fund as opposed to a platform? So this would be if you want, one is content, so really what type of projects and what is the size, and the second one is more, is this the right structure from an investment vehicle perspective?
Great. Thank you, Maria. So your first question really around the context. So I'll give an example of a developer that we're working with in East Africa. And effectively, they've gotten a project, which is one project that's called it about $2 million project. The capital requirement on a project like that, in terms of the financing of the equipment, is just under $1 million, right? So you can imagine for an SME type project developer that's not used to this typical type of projects, what's their first point of call in terms of funding that single project, right? So they're going to the banks and saying, geez, can you fund us for this? And the banks are requesting them to put up collateral. The idea is these developers, their model has been to raise funding on a project by project basis, right? Which limits the ability to win contracts, right? Without proving certainty of funding, and limits the ability to actually build the system and implementation teams. So what are we doing? We're saying, look, we like your track record, you have an excellent track record of completed projects, we will probably pre-qualify you for a facility or call it $10 million. Now, what's backing that? That's backed by the pipeline of actionable projects that we are seeing with them. We have projects that have already been awarded or are in line to be awarded, and giving them sort of a 3 to 5 year facility to execute on those projects. Certainly gives them certainty, and then aggregates rather than having to do due diligence on the individual one, $500,000 or $1 million project. That at least allows us to sort of address the needs of that developer. We're finding that if going to the local capital markets or to the local capital providers, they're having to go on a single project by single project basis and having to go through the whole qualification system in terms of getting that approved. So that's the first point to your question. The second question is really around, is this the right structure to do it, or would the fund structure be a better appropriate structure to do it in? The way we're looking at it is that we believe that this is a targeted solution that's part of our broader climate action strategy. And our broader climate action strategy encompasses a fund structure, right? But we believe that this is an actionable opportunity right now that can be rolled over into a fund structure in due course.
All right, thank you, Nick. So, in the interest of time, no. Let's start with Joram. You're eager to share something.
Thanks, Nick. Very excited, again, from an impact perspective, that you are looking to facilitate local developers at the kind of SME scale, which is clearly a gap in the market that needs addressing. I understand that in your capital structure you're looking for debt on your side. I still like to get a bit more clarity on the product side for the developer, because in my experience, development phases are best catered for with equity investments, because essentially that's equity risk. And then as you get to the construction phase, debt can be quite a useful product. And there I'd be interested, because I see we've got Zanaco here in the audience, and Zanaco is a leading bank in Zambia. What ideas you have to collaborate with local banks for the development phase where you can use debt? For example, also thinking about guarantee structures. FMO is a guarantee program, Nazira, where we guarantee banks, which would get around your collateral problem that you mentioned. So interested to hear your perspectives on that.
Great, thanks, Joram. So in terms of what we're thinking about on the product side for developers, these projects typically are short duration projects. right? So they will tend to be sort of 4 to 6 month projects on the implementation. And for them to embark on a project like this, they will already have a contract letter with a stipulated set of terms in terms of certain milestones when they'll get payments. To us, those contracts are a bankable item in terms of providing us with collateral, adequate collateral, and looking at how to structure our financing around that, right? And so the idea is aggregating those similar projects rather than sort of having a longer duration project with significant construction risk. The other bit that's quite a good risk mitigator in terms of this project is nearly 75% of the capital that we lend out is coming back before there's an element of construction risk, which is quite important. Now, to your point in terms of partnering with local banks and potential risk mitigation structures like credit guarantee facilities, that's a question that's come up, but it's actually come up on the other side of the capital structure, right? So it's come up from the insurers, for example, that have expressed interest in subscribing to the notes program and then requesting a credit guarantee. So we're in the market looking for a credit guarantee for the notes rather than a credit guarantee on the actual project. So those are our two needs at the moment in terms of a credit guarantee and, more importantly, the equity/mezz here in our capital structure. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you, Nick. So now we're moving on to our next fund manager, which will be Incofin Investment Management. So Leah Gonzalez, who's joining, who has shared a pre-recording with us. Leah will be presenting their proposition. She is the Regional Director and the Director of Debt Investments for Latin America and Caribbean at Incofin. Leah has 10 years of experience spread across investment banking, corporate finance, project finance, and development of financing instruments. Professional background includes working for Fondo Acceso, an initiative from the Gates Foundation, Vinci Infrastructure Group, Grupo Dinsa, and Belcorp. Can we play the video, please?
Good morning, Stefan. It's a great honor to participate in this conference, and I would have loved to be there with my fellow cohort members and the Dragons. But I'm glad that despite the distance and the challenging time zones, we can connect today thanks to technology. We all want to protect the Amazon, but to save the 6.7 million square meters of rainforest and the 10% of the world's known biodiversity, we need to invest in people. We have to ensure their food security, social inclusion, and climate resilience of more than 30 million people living in the Amazon. As a Colombian, the rainforest is the pride of my country. It is home of the jaguar, the pink dolphin, and more than 40,000 different kinds of plants. The Amazon is the richest ecosystem in the world, and the giant lupuna tree is among these and is believed to be the origin of the Amazon. The Amazon is not only important, it is essential. As the Earth's lungs, it is a key driver of the regional climate and a water source for its people. And we also know that despite the abundance of this biome, the Amazon is also home for some of the poorest people living in Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Brazil. And these people are stuck in a vicious cycle that starts with poverty, leads to hunger, takes us to new records of deforestation year on year, exacerbates the displacement and exclusion of people, and rounds back to more poverty. Poverty with one common denominator, violence. You're all experts in climate finance, and you know that most climate funding goes to supranational institutions, governments, and large corporations. Not enough money goes to small and medium enterprises, who are the backbone of the region's economic growth by employing almost 70% of its active workers. You're also aware that there is a huge disparity in opportunities for women in rural areas in these countries. Almost 40% of rural women don't have revenue of their own, even when they work more hours than men. Pay gap between men and women is higher in rural areas, especially in agriculture, where female landowners hardly reach 10 or 12%. As a result, women are more vulnerable to climate risks and food security, and they often have to navigate these circumstances alone with their children. You also probably know that only 1.7% of climate finance goes to farmers in developing countries. So if we want to ensure opportunities and climate resilience for the Amazon's most vulnerable, we need to work with SMEs, promoting agri-food systems, We need to empower women as actors of change within these communities, and we need focused climate-adapted financing to aid local communities in protecting the Amazon's biodiversity. So we at Incofin had an idea. We're impact asset managers with more than 20 years of experience working with micro-entrepreneurs, smallholder farmers, and SMEs in developing countries. We envision the concept of a fund we named Incofin Lupuna Fund to channel our expertise in financial inclusion and sustainable agri-food value chains to build opportunities, climate resilience, and inclusion in the Amazon. How will we do this? With the Mezzanine Fund focused on climate-smart SME projects in the Amazon. By combining technical assistance, mezzanine financing, and carbon credits into a blended finance ecosystem, we will work to break the vicious cycle that destroys our forests, our people, and leaves them unprotected in the middle of a climate crisis. We're here at COP27 to take climate action. We aim to invest in SMEs that are intentional about bringing scale to the bioeconomy of the Amazonian countries and becoming climate smart. We want women to be the motors of change, to spearhead the process of climate adaptation and ensuring food security through regenerative and diversified agriculture. We see the tradition of local communities not as a threat, but as an opportunity to protect the biodiversity of the rainforest by promoting sustainable extraction of native products such as Amazonian nuts, acai, and palmito. We foresee a comprehensive support that goes beyond mezzanine financing. We want Lupuna to be the source of opportunities for the people in the Amazon, just as it once was the origin of the forest itself. And we invite you to join us in developing climate-smart investment solutions and opportunities for the people of the Amazon rainforest. It is the most sustainable way to protect the Amazon, its biodiversity, and the people. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, let's hear about some reflections from our dragons. Maria Teresa, would you like to start with this?
Sure, pleasure. So I of course know very well the great job that Incofin has done in the past 20 years in, in a number of rural finance strategies. So great credentials for this project. I think we, in the financial inclusion universe, we also are aware that they've been very active with, credit cooperatives in a number of fair trade strategies. I guess my question is, I think the problem is clear, the need of financing as well, but I certainly would love to have a bit more information on what are we exactly financing? Again, a bit more on, pipeline of project, just to have some maybe examples. And also why mezzanine financing? This is a tool that, indeed can be used in many ways, but, and of course brings a lot of additionality. But in particular, it'd be interesting to know why mezzanine financing versus, private equity or senior debt. Why mezzanine financing? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Teresa. Joram, would you like to share some reflections?
Now it's working. Yeah, definitely. So again, I'm actually quite excited if I look at the problem that the fund is trying to solve for on the potential impact side. Certainly, agri value chains we know can have a very high impact on the climate action side of things. So that's exciting. I can kind of connect with Maria Teresa's questions around what are we precisely going to finance. I know that mezzanine for SMEs can be a very helpful product because at least you've solved your repayment problem as compared to equity. That said, it does raise the question as the fund is attacking the SME sector, What's the additionality relative to the local financial sector as well? So these would be some of the questions that I'd like to understand better. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Nancy?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I think it ticks many boxes in terms of the impact, in terms of targeting a critical area, targeting critical communities. You answered my gender question before I asked it, and I think it's a given that you're probably answering my biodiversity question as well. So that's all fantastic. I feel that this proposal is at quite an early stage, although obviously the Incofin themselves are very experienced. So I would need to know a little bit more, as was said by some of the other dragons, on what are you actually planning? You know, what could you give us a bit more details? Could you perhaps talk a bit about the pipeline that you've got or how you're going to develop it? And in particular, I have two sort of specific questions. You mentioned micro businesses and also SMEs. That's a huge range in size. So I would be, I would be interested to be a bit clearer on what size of entity you're looking at, because I think you might struggle to target micro entrepreneurs, sort of subsistence farming, and all the way up to medium size. And my second question is, you said, which sounds to me very important, this is not just for mezzanine financing, but also for support. I'm sure indeed that there is a plan that you have for technical assistance and for support, and I would want to know a bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So it sounds like there's a lot of follow-up for Leah and her team, so I'm sure to put them in touch with all of you. So last but not least, we have Catapult. We have Jørn Hannes online, who is an investment director and partner at Catapult based in Norway. He accelerates and invests in startups looking to help them grow through impact investments. He's passionate about tech and culture and how it affects everything around us. His background is in the tech and entertainment industries, in building entrepreneurial ecosystems and serving as a CEO for a VC-backed international tech startup. Jørn. Hold on, Jørn.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, that's great. And I see I have the dramatic slides behind me as well. That's an excellent start. So by Catapult, we invest in seed stage climate tech from around the world. And we've been doing that as a company since 2017, actually. We have 150 portfolio companies. You are now on the executive summary slide, which I think is quite simple, folks. Global warming is real. We're not on the left side, we're on the right-hand side. And so, yeah, Code Red for humanity, it's not very inspiring. My mission is to help people understand that there are solutions that are being built right now for every corporate out there that is committing to net zero by 2030 and have zero clue how to get it. Well, speak to a startup, because they're doing just that. So rather than saying Code Red for humanity, I'll say, how about this? You can make bets on the future. And that's what we do. On the next slide, you'll see a couple of images illustrating companies that are doing just that. They're building green solutions for the future. And what that means to us is that rather than looking at all the stuff that is worrying, we try to point towards the companies and entrepreneurs that are building green solutions right now. On the left-hand side, you'll see net zero concrete, almost. In a super hard to abate sector, Appeal Robotics are just developing concrete without cement, and it has a dramatic impact on the CO2 footprint of large structures. You'll see Dayforce designing new wind turbine blades for radically improved efficiency, and you'll see Glean radically changing the carbon footprint of urban mobility and logistics. Now, these are 3 out of 150 examples. My point is that green solutions are here. It's up to us to finance them. And you can make the biggest dent by actually doing that at seed. So to bring you the executive summary of Catapult on the next slide, we try to isolate this in three different steps to see what Catapult is doing. Now, we believe seed stage climate tech is the world's most attractive asset class. For the aforementioned reasons, it's obvious that this problem is real, but fixing it is going to be quite profitable. And also, there is a gap in global financing right now. There is not nearly enough capital going to seed stage companies. A lot of capital is committed to later stage, a lot of goodwill, a lot of regulatory forces, a lot of this and that. The gap is in seed stage, and that's precisely what we are addressing. And we're addressing that with the system. We have built a system over the years to measurably improve the growth of a seed stage startup, and that's through the accelerator that we built. It's for impact startups. And number three, it's proven. We know this now because we have a couple of unicorns that we seed financed, and we have we simply ask companies what they think in addition to what the market says. So the market says it's great, and the companies say, yeah, this actually helps what they're doing. So that's our thing, and it's a huge job. So who's doing that? Well, a team of emerging managers. This is our second fund. I'm joined by Nina and by Carl. In between us, we have many years of experience in investment banking, in actually working with impact startups from around the world, and in raising a climate fund, and now on to the second and bigger one. So we're here and we're ready for this task. And just to address also the accelerator as a framework for getting this done. Many just use the tried and tested method of raising capital, deploying that to companies, saying good luck. Yep, an accelerator is slightly more expensive than that. But you actually buy yourself some unfair advantages. Number one, you have now a system that allows for de-risking at the point where it makes the most sense. So de-risking, when a company is around 10 people and it just start building some commercial traction, that is the most attractive stage to actually go in and help a company, and it adds portfolio value. Number two, you get a deal flow access that you can't really get otherwise. There is no way of screening and investing in so many companies that we do unless you build a system around that. And number three, network effects. They tend to compound over time, such as true with this one. You actually get a better network, you get a better understanding of what you do, and it really helps the companies as a virtuous cycle. So to bring that all back to the headline, yeah, we are Catapult. We invest in seed stage climate tech because, well, climate change is real and fixing it is going to be profitable. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Jorn. Now, over to the dragons. Jorn, you want to start first?
Sure, thank you. Well, again, it sounds very exciting and like it can scale up very, very fast. So you've tickled my interest, and I'm very curious actually how you do it. So would you be able to give a very practical example of how you've managed the things that you've just conceptually explained? And
yes. Thank you for that. So number one is you need to speak to a lot of companies. We look at around 2,000 companies every year, in fact, and that's the whole goal of this: to build a large network and to reach out to many founders. If you are serious about climate change, you need to speak to founders who are building solutions right now. The truth will probably not come from large corporates around the world. They need help from others. So we speak to as many founders as we can. We do diligence them, and we invest in the top 1% approximately that we can find. At the same time, we raise capital. So we find the companies, we raise capital, we hand it over to the entrepreneurs as soon as possible, and then we work with them on things that are really, really hard as an individual startup. Quantifying impact, that's hard. Building a credible fundraising plan for the next 4 or 5 years, that's hard. Attracting talent is hard. Doing those things are hard. That's precisely what we help them with. So that's our system. Find the best entrepreneurs, hand over the money, and tell them some lessons that are really, really transferable from one startup to another.
Great, thank you for that answer. Maria Teresa, would you have some reflections or questions?
Yeah, I mean, maybe because we are again in the midst of COP27, and maybe because also, as you said when you introduced me, my focus has really been emerging and frontier markets. I guess my question is a bit of a fundamental question on really what would be the spillover effect for these technologies being applied to emerging and frontier markets.
Thank you. Well, we're quite happy to be global investors. We think that's an edge. Most investors tend to ignore some of the large emerging markets. We have now 40 countries represented in our portfolio, so we're happy about diversity. And we think that this framework applies to everyone. The framework of using venture capital as the growth mechanism and using startups as the method for experimenting, that is just universally true. And so by applying that all over the world and by connecting people with a global network, you can make a local huge difference. Those things are the same. Building a startup is roughly the same, and startups will need to speak that international language to make sense of that business model and to find their customers and to reach out to the larger capital institutions if you want to scale. And that's what we believe in. There is a time value to solving these problems as soon as possible, and so that's why you need the international venture capital framework of getting it done pretty fast. That's what we do.
Excellent, thank you, Jorn. Nancy, last but not least.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting indeed, and targeting a slightly different but very, very essential area where we need much more finance and, as you said, to accelerate and demonstrate the solutions that are coming and make them larger scale so that they can indeed step into some of these what are called hard to abate sectors. So that's great. I have a question on the geography. I heard you answer the other question, so my question on geography is slightly different. Quite a lot of the time, investors are maybe in one category or another, but there's a large group of investors that want to invest in developing countries. And I've been through that discussion myself with the EIB, in that clearly we invest in the EU and then we invest outside in developing countries. But for example, we don't invest in the United States or Canada and Australia because that's not our mandate. So I wonder whether you've thought about how you might manage that, if you can attract finance from those that need to show that finance is going to developing countries or going to impact in developing countries. It might be worth you thinking about that, because that's a very distinct and a set of investors that are particularly interested in climate impact. So just raise that point. The second question is back to my gender question. I think we know that there's huge opportunities for improving the results from climate entrepreneurial companies if they are proactively supporting gender empowerment, or indeed actually run by women or run by a well-balanced mix, shall we say, gender-wise. So I think that might be something you want to look at, because otherwise maybe you might be missing that angle. Now, if you are, then I would just be interested to know about it. And my last question is, are you looking at seed funding for adaptation technologies? Because this is massively important. So not just low carbon solutions, but the seed funding for the technology and services and kinds of innovations that we're going to need in agriculture, in water, and so on, for adaptation solutions. Sorry, that's a lot of questions, but very interesting.
That's great. I take the opportunity. So number one, in Africa, we now have 25 investments in total, but we discovered the same. It's clear that building a dedicated entity and actually having people on the ground is the way to go. There are many capital allocators that follow this. So we have built Catapult Africa as a result, and I have colleagues that are now will develop is the keyword, a fund that is targeting that in particular, climate action in Africa. So yes, we have realized that, and we see that that is important. There are many capital allocators that have certain requirements. We understand and take that seriously. Number two, on gender. Yep, one of our close partner organizations is SHE, Social Human Equity, and we work with them over the course of years to also adjust our own approach to this. We have an AI science project ongoing now at Catapult in its third year right now to understand bias in selection process, to count how we look at companies, to not remove bias because that's impossible, but to be aware of them and investigate them. We also collect metrics from companies across a wide range of categories on diversity metrics. We ask for many things, and we put this in investment agreements with all companies we invest in. Aside from gender, we also ask about age and different things. We try to build a comprehensive view on the sort of visible and non-visible diversity that we invest in. And so we present this to all of our LPs. It's an important part of what we do. So I appreciate the lens on that. And third, I also think that if you invest in seed stage climate tech, you need to be somewhat pragmatic about looking at solutions. One important point is that when we invest, we can't know what the impact will be. There is no way to quantify that 100%. You invest in the potential climate impact. And so you need to target some deep tech cases, you need to target some adaptation cases, you need to target essentially a range of different things, because building a startup, that's hard enough in and of itself. And our job is to facilitate founders with intentionality that are building something with climate impact. But that will happen through different ways. And if we don't accept that, then we're going to have a hard time actually making real change. So yeah, I confirm we look across a wide range of categories. But it has potential climate impact in a huge way. That's an essential part of it.
All right, thank you, Jorn. And I think it's clear to say that anybody sitting in this crowd and watching the Dragons ask questions, it is very important to have a strong approach on diversity, equity, inclusion, and integrate it across all your activities. So, just to wrap up the session, we hope that this was a... Oh, Jorn, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just a holistic comment before you wrap up the session. I see that the government of Luxembourg is also in the room here, and I'd like to congratulate you with the vision of actually setting up the ICFA program. I mean, having engaged today with these 4 very creative and impactful fund propositions, it's clear to me that the ICFA program is actually adding something to the European development finance space, and that's a compliment I don't give lightly, because it's a pretty crowded space, I'd say. So, wonderful initiative, and I'm very much looking forward to the funds that will be coming out of this program over the coming years. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I say something?
Nancy.
Yeah, I'd just like to say the same thing, and I think I had the pleasure to be at an accelerator event, I think 2 or 3 COPs ago, and it's just so important, this supporting of, you know, emerging funds is absolutely critical, and also the shared learning. Once you have companies that are in the accelerator, that there's, you know, this shared experience to really help them learn and help them avoid some of the pitfalls. So fantastic. But I would just say that as well as that, and of course this is an accelerator event, there is the EIB Climate Finance platform, which is the Luxembourg government, and that then is, I think, complementary, because it brings in concessional finance to those funds. So I just would say, I know this is an accelerator event, but I think the way that Luxembourg has looked at supporting the fund managers, helping them overcome problems, resolve issues, and then also provide concessional funding, I think that double delivery is super important. And we've had then, as the EIB, the opportunity to invest in some of those funds, both through the platform and ourselves, and several of them have come through the accelerator. So, it really does result in funds getting to the market, and yeah, just totally agree with what Joran just said.
Thank you, Nancy. And I
wonder if I can say also a final comment on my side. So I find this initiative absolutely crucial. As you know, we certainly have, a Blue Orchard, a big history of fund management for development, for climate. Together with the Ministry of Finance of Luxembourg, we're working on a fund-of-fund strategy, the Green Earth Impact Fund, and I really would love to see how all these initiatives are really building a pipeline of investment opportunities that, as they scale up, can go through different investment vehicles. So I'm really very excited because I think the accelerator is absolutely needed, and we'll have to keep accelerating and fast-tracking and scaling up these initiatives as they move forward.
Thank you, Maria Teresa, and thank you all for those kind words. It's clear that we're servicing a market need and getting a lot of support from the ecosystem in general. So hopefully this was very informative for all the people here in the audience as well as online. If you want to know more, please reach out to us. We're happy to connect you with anybody from our fund managers as well. So finally, just wanted to say a really nice thank you to our dragons who've taken the time and all the effort and all the brain power they've put into asking these questions to our fund managers, as well as our fund managers online for their great pitches. And finally, obviously, for all the audience for being here as well. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.